Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to Good Measure. My name is David, and I'll be your host today. Today we have Martin Ballard, Chief Architect at Microsoft Federal. He's here today to talk with us about his work at Microsoft and how technology has influenced business and leadership. Martin, thank you for being here with us today. Do you mind quickly introducing yourself to those in the audience who may not be familiar with you or your work?
Sure. Thank you, David. I really appreciate you having me on and having this conversation today. My name's Martin Ballard. I have been working to serve public sector customers probably since about 1998. So we're coming up on about 25 years. I have had a few brief interludes in supporting nationwide healthcare verticals and labor. But for the most part, my concentration has been in the public sector.
Awesome. I know many people might have heard of the chief architect role, but may not actually understand what you do. So could you please explain to my audience what exactly are the responsibilities of your job and kind of what sectors of technology will you cover in that job?
That's an excellent question, David. And if I'm being transparent with you, I would love it if somebody out in your audience could explain to me what a chief architect is supposed to do. Um, it is, at least in my experience, one of those roles that can be polymorphic, and by which I mean it depends on your industry, it depends on your vertical, it depends a lot on even your own leadership chain in terms of what they want to see, come out of your interaction with the customers. I can tell you that the definition that my boss and I agree on, which I'm happy about, is that a chief architect really is meant to operate above operational levels,
Hmm.
such that you have a holistic view of, of the landscape in a component view with an emphasis on how to integrate. And that integration happens amongst technologies, but also amongst the processes and the people who interface with both.
Hmm.
So that's really where I try to spend most of my time. I can tell you that if you were to delve deeper into any specific leg of technology under my portfolio, I can name three people who work with me who are much smarter than I am, who can go much deeper than I can. One of the things that I hope I bring to the table is the ability to see how things can work a little better together.
Hmm. And so would I be right in saying that your job isn't actually the specific focus on certain sectors, but actually combining them and sort of repackaging them and making them very understandable for people who are in at the C-suite level or for directors?
Absolutely. So, my very smart friends, all of whom are far deeper in specific legs of technology, would be the perfect people to talk to IT directors or lead administrators in terms of implementation. But what we found is that getting to the why, right,
Hmm.
and getting commitment from a customer's organizational leadership chain really is what moves the needle in terms of introducing transformational technologies. When we work from the bottom up, and I say this as somebody who did in 1998, I was swapping tape reels on a reel-to-reel mainframe, if you can believe it.
Hmm.
So, coming from a very operational and tactical level and working your way up, you're very concerned with solutioning.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the limitation that we run into when we're in those roles is that we have a very iterative mindset. How can I squeeze another 10% out of this? How can I do this with a few less resources? How can I combine this, large cluster into, a small cluster, things like that. In order to really transform or to, you know, change from one way of thinking to another requires, a larger scale view of the business itself. And that's the good news, is having a technology base is nice to have in your pocket, but you really only need your humanity and your empathy to
Hmm.
speak to folks at the C level and at the D level, the director level, because these are folks who, I have a boss and you have a boss every day, but somebody like Satya Nadella has hundreds of thousands of bosses in this form of shareholders,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in general, the perception of Microsoft as a leader, both in capability but also integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So folks who are in the C-suite are under tremendous pressure to deliver human-based results, right?
Mm-hmm.
Delight with the with the product, or delight with the service, or a rock solid stability, or an ultra dependable security reputation. These are all human elements, and so being able to understand the human motivations really allows me to go back and say, this is the blend of technologies that can help you get there.
Mm-hmm.
But in most of these kinds of conversations, the technology discussion never happens in the same room as the C-suite. Of a COO, a CTO, or a CIO, or even a CISO, I really make an effort to keep things abstract and either business or human related, and then that allows me to come later with a technical implementation which satisfies the pressures that they're under to deliver for not just their employees but also their shareholders, or in the case where I work in the federal civilian U.S. government, the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm. And so, speaking about the sort of process of bringing the technology and actually implementing it, can you describe a particular challenging project or sort of goal that you've had that you've worked on, and how you use your sort of technologies to help your customer or your client achieve their sort of goal?
I can. Right now, I'm deeply engaged with a project that spans the entire federal civilian CIO council. And this comprises of about 22 agencies, all of the cabinet level agencies, but several of the more important agencies of the U.S. government, like the Department of Justice or the USDA. Some of these, agencies that provide value to the daily operations of the government that we don't always think about. I think in the last 10 or 15 years, Microsoft has excelled at helping these customers maximize their efficiencies within their agency, within their organizational structure, meaning we
Mm-hmm.
become highly efficient at, um, you know, talking to somebody who's 3 floors below us or in a different building, but within the same organizational boundary. I think where we're going to make the most impact, where we're going to do the most good in the next 5 to 10 years, is helping break down the barriers of communication between those agencies. And you
Mm-hmm.
can imagine that nothing big in a government can happen without, within just the purview of a single agency.
Mm-hmm.
Often it involves the Veterans Affairs working with the Social Security Administration and also the CDC or the FDA. And that's where our probably our most important work lies ahead of us. And so we are underway in a project. We have managed to help these agencies establish visibility into things as fundamental as calendar-free busy, as being able to IM each other, trying to homogenize the collaboration platforms that between these agencies to
Mm-hmm.
maximize their ability, to interact with each other, which will hopefully drive down the overall time it takes, to do these interagency collaborations, which of course
Mm-hmm.
drives down costs, brings value, allows them to free up budget for other, critical priorities.
Mm-hmm.
That project has been going on for wow, just almost 2 years now. And I wish I could say we were complete, but we're not. And where I found the most challenging um, uh, obstacles to be is once again in the human domain,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's, hey, I've invested heavily in my own knowledge. This is what I'm comfortable with. You're asking me to change platforms. That's going to cause, a burden on me, on my agency, on my budget.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had mentioned that you have to lead with empathy in any of your conversations. If my rebuttal to that were, yeah, but you're not looking at the benefits, that makes that person feel excluded.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can relate to those pressures and assure them that, we are going to help them actually on all of those levels, if we can get through, this amount of setup or pre-work first,
Hmm.
we can actually help them achieve their goals, at an even greater efficiency rate than they are achieving today. That has been probably the universal lubricant at
Hmm.
every juncture where this project has ground to a halt. It's not really about technical implementation, but
Hmm.
really about helping folks who are, responsible for the success or failure of a project,
Hmm.
understand that they've got someone in their corner that's going to help them be successful.
And so, speaking about this sort of collaboration and sort of communication and sort of helping others understand these sort of products that they're implementing into the company, can you sort of describe your experience providing strategic guidance to these C-suite professionals, directors, and how do you ensure this clear and effective communication? And does it does this sort of communication differ when you're talking with these professionals in comparison to your normal team?
Oh, sure. I mean, Dave, first of all, that's a really heads up question, because just as you go through your day and you may talk to a policeman, or maybe one of your own customers, you notice you have a natural you have a natural way of contextualizing your conversation. This
Hmm.
is a very casual conversation, and yet we're talking about some serious meaty topics. There's not a lot of room for wacky jokes or props, right, in this conversation, and that's just about taking, the note in the room, reading the room. What I can
Hmm.
say about the difference between technical implementers versus organizational thought leaders or decision makers is it is about the outcome and not about the implementation, as I said.
Hmm.
Um, and you would be surprised how limited a four-star general's schedule is in a day. A chief of staff for the typical four-star general in the U.S. military today will budget out that commander's time in 5-minute increments. And so there are people who will vie for weeks in order to gain 5 minutes for this commander's
Hmm.
attention. You can imagine that if you cannot communicate your point quickly, succinctly, and impactfully,
Hmm.
within the first 3 minutes, because he's already thinking about the next meeting he's got
Hmm.
about 3 minutes in, right?
Yeah.
So it is about being succinct, about being impactful, about being clear.
Hmm.
These are all things that I have been working on my entire life and probably will continue on working on until I retire. It's a practice and not a state that you achieve,
Hmm.
but knowing that the time pressures and the constraints that your audience are under will help gauge what kind of information you bring to a briefing.
Hmm.
uh, there is something called a bluff, a BLUF, that we see often in written communication and email communication, and it means bottom line up front.
Hmm.
And I would say that you would be hard pressed to find anybody who does their business in a C-suite every day, and that means the administrative assistants who help these people,
Hmm.
their, and their lieutenants. All of these people work in a very time constrained way that really requires, clear, concise, and impactful communication in a short period of time.
Hmm. I, oh, were you gonna say something else, or
No, no, that's
oh,
I think I demonstrated the antithesis to that principle well enough by taking 2 minutes to answer the question, but
mhm.
there you go.
That makes sense. And I was also wondering, so focusing a bit more about the technology side now, how do you sort of prioritize and focus on core functionality across your sort of products on this platform? And how do you discuss your approach into the integration of this technology to your clients?
Well, integration's a tool, and in some cases it's a strategy. And I can tell you that it's a strategy that Microsoft employs. There are other strategies. There are what you might see, some of our competitors will use what they call a best of breed approach, which
Hmm.
is sort of we'll pick one of these and one of these and one of these, and together we'll put together a solution. Microsoft has chosen a story of integration. So I work in, the solution area I work in is called modern work, but really what it is Microsoft 365
Hmm.
and the many components that fall under that umbrella, of which there are approaching probably 20 discrete technologies, anywhere from the bedrock email routing of Exchange Online to the secure file management of OneDrive and SharePoint, all the way down to low code, no code solutioning with Power Platform.
Hmm.
So it's quite not only is it a lot of technologies,
Hmm.
but they span a rather broad set of capabilities.
Hmm.
So how am I going to convince you to, if you bought this suite of services and you're only using 30% of them, it's in my interest, but it's in your interest as well to take advantage of the full breadth of the services you've bought. So
Hmm.
our argument of integration allows us to say, well, you may be using Zoom, and there's no doubt that Zoom is great. Microsoft Teams, right, has all of the features of Zoom. It also offers you this, and it's integrated into the identity authorization mechanism of Azure Active Directory. So it
Hmm.
integrates with everything else you're doing. Um, you own it already. It works well with everything else you use. And we hope that that provides a competitive edge that we want to see somebody consider when they're looking for teleconferencing software. But because there are so many discrete technologies under the solution area that I work in, and I told you that I try not to get bogged down too much into any single one or two,
Hmm.
where I try to focus is on the border of each technology as it butts up against the other, right? So what I call a border of interoperability, meaning within, say, the Microsoft Teams platform, am I able to present, business critical line of business applications in a way so that when I am chatting with you, David, and we've made a decision and I need to go implement that decision, do I need to close that down and open up a different piece of software, or can I bring up a critical line of business app within the same desktop interface that I'm chatting with you in? Right? This is a savings of clicking and honestly what I call context switching, which
Hmm.
is deleterious to my ability to smoothly transition from one task to the other. The
Hmm.
more abrupt and jarring that that transition is, the more productivity I tend to lose in the day. And so, if I can demonstrate to my customers how they can accomplish everything they need to accomplish without, with a minimum of context switching, I can bring, promises of, a not just more efficiency, but for the sake of the employee themselves, less stress,
Hmm.
and frankly, a lower stressful operating environment with more productivity. So I always try to frame it as a win-win-win situation. Obviously, we'd love for you to use our products, but it is about making the organization more efficient, and we do that by helping the employee actually have just a better working experience every day.
Hmm. And so, how do you balance actually the need for innovation in your sectors, but also consider at the same time the limited resources in the public sector?
Well, actually, it's funny because I actually see those two things not in an opposing perspective, but in a complementary perspective.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of way I talked about incremental or iterative efficiencies, which absolutely we all need that. Our gas mileage on cars goes up 2 to 3 miles per gallon every year. These are great things. Wouldn't it be great though if battery technology advanced sufficient that we could fully charge a Tesla in 10 minutes or
Hmm.
less? Then we go from arguing about whether 36 miles of the gallon is enough of an improvement over 34 to, hey, we're all electric and we're not creating carbon emissions at all.
Hmm.
That's a revolutionary job. That's an innovation. And so they're obviously more rare. They're obviously more difficult to attain, but those opportunities do exist out there, and they are, a prime way to free up resources. In
Mm-hmm.
the government, the area that I work in, we're these are entities that are not motivated by profit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I come in with a return on investment calculator and I say, look, you'll you'll touch twice as many people for half as much cost, et cetera. They're not really looking at it, that way. They're not looking at it that way. They're not looking at a return for the purposes of a ledger book.
Mm-hmm.
But they're looking for that principle, but the language is all wrong. If I say, hey, we can, bring you over to this platform and ensure that, data leakage is completely eliminated, and give, all of your employees a security sanctioned tool to get their job done, and it will, and I'll give you a 50% efficiency on that, um, that you can reinvest against your top priorities, right? And
Okay.
so, hey, now I freed up two systems admins who don't have to, read logs and troubleshoot things every day. It isn't about taking those people's jobs. It's about saying those people are not free to tackle your next highest priority. So in a scarcity environment, it's all about, you know, reducing the amount of time it takes for folks to do so that they can actually take on new tasks and get more done in a day.
Okay. And so lastly, I was just wondering, what are some long-term goals that you have, and how do you see technology and sort of your role as a chief architect evolving in the future?
Wow, great question. One that I ponder every day, I have to tell you. My own mother would ask me what I intend to do when I grow up. One of the one of the privileges of this job and working in this sector is that I don't really feel like I have had to grow up, or maybe even have to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but if I were dreaming with you about where I might like to be, I will say I have a wonderful mentor here at Microsoft, who serves as our CTO for the business unit that I'm in. And every day I marvel at his ability to hold in one hand human nature, with technology and technological capability, and craft a conversation from those two things that motivates leaders of, you know, uh, government agencies with hundreds of thousands of employees, to make a big change, to walk away from a path that they had been on for 20 years, and to walk a new path with greater rewards. So I look at that and I think, well, maybe CTO. It feels a little grandiose, to be honest. But even at this stage in my career, it feels good to dream big.
Mm-hmm.
So CTO would be a pretty rad job to have, especially if you can have the kinds of impacts that I've watched my friend and mentor have, in the customer space.
Well, awesome. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? That's all of the questions I have.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sure you'll edit this for brevity, I hope anyway. I'm
Yes.
I'm overly verbose, but um I guess just looking back at my career and the steps I've taken, um, you know, I guess I'm of the mind to offer some unsolicited advice. If I could go back and give myself some advice, it is to um listen to myself and really notice what invigorates me and excites me,
Mm-hmm.
versus what I think the next big thing might be, or what would give me more job security. Um, when I have noticed the thing that gives me the passion, the excitement, it gets me talking faster and wanting to talk to many different people about this one amazing aspect that I've been considering. When I've leaned into that, those are points in my career that I've excelled. And I'm convinced that your colleagues, your teammates, and your leadership, seeing the passion
Mm-hmm.
with which you engage and lean into something,
Mhm.
matters at least as much as your technical capability or your experience, because I
Mhm.
think it's known that it's far easier to educate yourself on a technical capability than it
Mhm.
is to find a way to generate passion where it doesn't exist.
All right. That's amazing. So that was awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Well, that's it for today.
All right. Thank you, David.